Hey, welcome everyone to Pick Dr. Osborne's Brain. We've got a great live Q&A for you today. Just a reminder, if you missed the show on Tuesday, we did a deep dive into menopause and hot flashes and natural remedies, things that you could do in your diet and lifestyle, as well as supplementation to support you through that. So make sure if that's a struggle that you have, you go back and watch that replay from Tuesday night. Now, also, we're going to be taking questions around that topic today. So if you've got questions of that nature, go ahead and start typing those into the feed now. And as always, I'll do my best to get those answered. Now, if you'd like to support Gluten-Free Society and Dr. Osborne's mission, make sure you go over to glutenfreesociety.org today and check out our women's health section. Everything there right now is on deep discount, so you can save money and support us and get the supplements that are certified grain and gluten-free that you need to support your good health. And you just use promo code HER12. We'll put a link up for you in the video as well. So again, thanks for tuning in. Let's dive in to your questions. Let's see here. My 9-year-old asked me to, My 9-year-old asked me to ask why he would wake up with wild shaking and a racing heart that was calmed after hot showers using magnesium flakes. I told him it was stress and anxiety, but he wanted me to ask you. So Polly, if he's waking up that way, it very much could be aggressive stress. But I would say, what is a 9-year-old stressing about? There may be some underlying issues that he's going through at school or somewhere else. But I would also consider nutritional deficiency testing with him. He may have some key deficiencies that don't help or don't allow his body to properly regulate his cortisol well. And so what can happen is you get these massive spikes of cortisol in the morning. It can drive that type of shaking sensation and anxiety. And for some people, it can be something like a vitamin B5 deficiency or vitamin C deficiency. Magnesium deficiency can contribute to that because you need those nutrients to balance and regulate stress hormones. So I would look into maybe doing something like that beyond the obvious potential issues he might be having in his just in his day-to-day. If he's got a lot of stress, maybe going to school, maybe there's a bully, maybe there's something else going on that you need to ask him about or get involved with figuring out. Let's see. Scroll down on that one for me.
This one.
Yep. Didn't see here. Sandra says, is it bad if you go into menopause and you have absolutely no symptoms? I feel nothing different. No, it's not bad at all. That's quite a healthy menopause, Sandra. I think so many women struggle with more aggressive symptoms. One of the top reasons is being overweight. So going into menopause, being overweight, there are a number of inflammatory factors that occur that can trigger or contribute to hot flashes and other menopausal symptoms because of the inflammation. And so being overweight is kind of a cue in that could be a problem. So you don't have to be in menopause and be miserable. That's something else that everyone should understand. Now, there's a lot of variable with that because, some women have had total hysterectomies for whatever reasons they opted to do those types of surgeries. And so they may not have adequate estrogen, progesterone. And so when they go into their menopause, or when they go into that time of life, they have much more symptoms because of the prior surgery. So there's a lot of variable in that, but it's perfectly fine to not be symptomatic in menopause. And actually, I would argue much preferable. Are cured meats an ideal source of nitric oxide? No, I wouldn't say so at all. An ideal source of nitric oxide is, there's several different amino acids that contribute to the production of nitric oxide. So you've got, classic L-arginine, but also citrulline. And then you need things like vitamin C to put nitric oxide together. So, there's no vitamin C in cured meats. You're going to get amino acids in those meats, but I wouldn't call it the ideal source for sure. Let's see here. How can a woman increase her testosterone naturally? Should I worry about it if it is low? Yeah, I mean, you don't want it to be low. Being low is not necessarily a good thing, Lim. And so, how can you increase it naturally? One of the best ways to improve testosterone naturally without taking any kind of pills or supplements is weight resistance or weight bearing exercise. The more muscle lean mass you have, the more testosterone you're going to produce. This has been shown consistently time and time again. So, the low hanging fruit of increasing your testosterone naturally would be to not, and again, when I say weight bearing exercise, I don't mean jogging, I don't mean calisthenics, I don't mean cardiovascular, I mean weight bearing. So many women are scared of building these big, huge muscles, and the fear is that they would be less feminine as a result of having big muscles, as a result of working out, and that's just not true. You can still lift weights and not develop kind of a She-Hulk kind of body that defeminizes you. But weight resistance, probably one of the best things you can do. There also are nutrients related to the production of testosterone. Probably the biggest one, classic, is zinc. Another one being selenium. These are very important minerals for your body's ability to make testosterone. You also need cholesterol to make testosterone. And so, there's been this battle going on since the 80s, even really before that, cholesterol has been kind of the demon, so to speak. And so many people are taking cholesterol reducing medications like the HMG-CoA reductase inhibitors or the statins, and even the fibrates and the bile acid sequestrants, those types of medicines. My opinion of them is that I would never personally use any of them, because at the end of the day, you need cholesterol to build all your hormones, testosterone being one of them. And so you get into, one of the reasons why I suspect we have a hormone deficiency problem of epidemic proportions in the US is because of the massive attack on cholesterol. So again, lift some weights, don't try to lower your cholesterol on purpose, and make sure you're eating plenty of fat, because again, it's plenty of fat. It's a building block for putting those hormones together. Make sure you're getting adequate zinc and selenium, and you might also consider boron in that mix. Let's go down the middle. Okay, I met someone who they're 61. I met some women who are in their 60s and still have their periods. Is that normal? Yes, it can be. I mean, healthy women can have cycles, well past their 50s. It's kind of been this classical myth in the US that, once you're past 35, you're somehow an at-risk pregnancy. This is, kind of the standard message in the OB/GYN community. But you're not really at risk. The problem today is that people are more unhealthy than they were. Let's just go back in time 30 or 40 or 50 years ago. The resiliency of our health, and this is true of the US, it's true of Canada, it's true of the UK and Europe. It's true in pretty much most what we would call industrialized countries, where processed food has become the staple. We see less robustness. We see shorter menopause time, or not. I'm sorry, I said that incorrectly. We see shorter time in a woman's life where she actually has a cycle. In essence, the garbage food that we've been feeding people has reduced their fertility years, and so there are many women going into menopause far too early than what they should actually go into. So it's not uncommon to see, or I should say it is uncommon, but it shouldn't be uncommon to see a woman in her 60s still be cycling. Can hot flashes be caused by being anemic or iron deficient? I haven't seen hot flashes be caused so much by being anemic or iron deficient. I have seen hot flashes be caused when women are on thyroid medications and the dose is too strong. So I get that one a lot, but not so much from anemia, because there are triggers for hot flashes, like caffeine. Too much caffeine can trigger hot flashes. Definitely too much thyroid medicine. Some people are on the ADD, ADHD medicines like Adderall. The stimulant medications can over long enough periods of time, and some people can trigger hot flashes. So, but I haven't seen someone with an iron deficiency anemia where the iron deficiency is actually the cause. What are the most important supplements that I need during menopause? Um, so there's two critical ones that I would say everyone should take. And whether you're in menopause or whether you're not, I say these. I would stand by these regardless. Number one would be a high quality multivitamin. Number two would be a high quality omega-3 with an equal or approximately equal concentration of EPA and DHA. Meaningful values of those omega-3s are very important. Now, beyond that, it's unique and independent to the individual. So, some women are going to have had, again, prior surgical histories. Maybe they've had a hysterectomy. They may need more vitamin C. They may need more vitamin B5. Some women are on other medications. Like, there's a lot of individual variability to answer that question because it's not like a one size fits all, but as a bare minimum, those two things. Now, if you've had a total hysterectomy or even a partial hysterectomy and you're looking for supplements that act as what we would call adaptogens, meaning that they would have some mild estrogenic effects because you're not making estrogen because you've had that organ surgically removed, and maybe you're not on estrogen replacement therapy, but things like chaste tree chaste tree berry is a adaptogen that can bind to estrogen receptors and have some estrogen mimicking effects. And so some women find that that's extremely helpful in this type of situation. We actually have a formula for women's hormone balance for those of you who have had hysterectomies, or for those of you who are going into menopause or are having a miserable time in menopause. It's called Ultra Balance. It's something I would recommend that you look at because there are a number of ingredients in that. Many of them are these adaptogens that I'm talking about, and there are other nutrients like DIM and calcium D-glucarate that are important as hormone regulating support agents. So look at that and consider whether or not it might be right for you. My mother-in-law is 70 and she still gets hot flashes. I mean, there's probably something amiss, something awry in her. I would imagine. I mean, I've seen a lot of women over the years going through menopause where, again, there are a lot of different ways you can taper hot flashes. And if she's having them at that age, there's probably something, I would imagine, something pathological happening that's just not being discovered or found. I like this comment. Shannon says, I eliminated all grains from my diet about 2 months ago, and my symptoms have gone away. No more fatigue, but I still have hot flashes. Things to consider, Shannon. One is you've only been doing it 2 months, and it may take a little bit more time than that. If you are gluten sensitive and you've been eating it your whole life, it takes at a bare minimum 2 months just to get the existing grain gluten out of your system. Then once it's completely out of your system, then we go into a healing or the ability to start healing. So when you've taken away the thing that's doing the damage, now your body can start to turn its attention on healing. You might consider nutrition status as an important thing to investigate. Again, vitamin and mineral deficiencies, there's several of them that can contribute to hot flashes or hormone imbalance beyond the diet change itself. You may also be eating some other foods that you're reactive to. And so you might also consider, speaking with your doctor about getting those things tested. Yeah, so William says, you spoke a little bit about cortisol, but what about cholesterol and vitamin C to make our hormones? Yes, you need a lot of nutrients for hormone production. Cholesterol being a building block, vitamin C is very critical for the production of progesterone and DHEA and testosterone and estrogen. Vitamin B5 is necessary, zinc is necessary. So there's a whole cascade of nutrients that are important in that regard. It's one of the reasons why I recommend nutritional testing, because your guess will be as good as mine. And if you have the data, then you can supplement accordingly. But if you don't, and it just becomes a shotgun, let's try a little bit of everything and see if something sticks and works. And I just don't like to work that way. When people come to see me, it just creates it creates a confusion over time, especially if somebody's not getting better. Which thyroid test should I get to make sure it's not my thyroid? So again, hot flashes in the thyroid, TSH, T3, T4, reverse T3, and free T3 and free T4. Those are good places to start, Mary. If your TSH is too low, if it's below 0.5, what you're gonna if you're on thyroid medication, you're potentially being over medicated. So if your TSH is coming back below 0.5 and you're on thyroid medication, talk to your doctor about that and see if lowering your med is the right choice. If your T3 or T4 are too high, this could also be a problem. So, again, those are kind of the core things that you're looking at. As well, if your reverse T3 is too high, that could also indicate a problem that you're being over medicated or that you don't have adequate selenium. And so that may be a key for you as well. What is POTS? POTS is it's a postural blood pressure problem. When people go from seating to standing, their blood pressure, their heart can't maintain the blood flow pressure, and so there's a dizziness that can occur. So it's sometimes referred to as postural orthostatic tachycardia. We have a video on POTS, I think. Okay. Yep. Maybe we can put that up for Kay. Could fibromyalgia cause symptoms to be worse? You mean hot flash symptoms or menopause symptoms? Yeah, I mean, fibromyalgia, it can cause a lot of problems to become worse. If you have ever been diagnosed with fibromyalgia and you're struggling to get answers, I would just say this for anyone with fibromyalgia or chronic fatigue syndrome, you really need to do a deep dive, go down the rabbit hole around mold. One of my colleagues, clinician up in Dallas, he did a study years ago. His practice focused predominantly on fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue, and I think it was like 93% of his patients tested positive for mold toxicosis or mold toxin poisoning. And so, if you've been diagnosed with those are horrible things to deal with and suffer with, but for many people, mold plays an issue. Now, gluten can also play an issue there, and so either one of those would be great places to start. Can taking a beef ovary fallopian tube or ovary pill help with menopause symptoms? I don't have any experience in that, so I don't want to give you an answer because I can't comment from a place of experience. It's not anything I've seen any literature or research on. That being said, that doesn't mean it might not be helpful for some, but just not something I can comment on intelligently. Does organic soy milk help to boost estrogen? It doesn't boost estrogen. Soy contains a couple, like genistein and diazine. These are two compounds in soy that are adaptogens. So they're like estrogenic adaptogens. They can bind to estrogen receptors. They don't literally increase your estrogen, but they can increase the reactivity of your estrogen receptors. And so in that regard, some women do find soy to be beneficial going through menopause. What you got to watch out for, I'm glad Penny, you mentioned organic, because that's one of the big risks with a lot of these soy-based products is the fact that most soy grown today is GMO. And so it's also most likely got its fair share of glyphosate in it, which is not something that's going to help you restore your health. That's it for the old YouTube. Okay, let's see here. My problem is after having a stroke, I got put on blood thinners and hot flashes came back. Any extra diet suggestions in this situation? Age 73 with Hashimoto's. Again, going back to see a lot of women that are being medicated with their thyroids that struggle with hot flashes because they're being over medicated. So checking your thyroid would be one thing I'd encourage you to do. Beyond that, talk to your doctor about alternatives to the blood thinners. Even though you've had a stroke, there are plenty of things that can thin your blood if your doctor's willing to measure you accordingly. Like there are a number of different tests that help you measure blood thickness and viscosity and clotting. So just to give you a few names of some tests that you can talk to your doctor about. But one thing, if you're on blood thinners, first of all, they should be measuring your prothrombin, also your prothrombin time and INR. They should be measuring your D-dimer. They should be measuring your fibrinogen. They should be measuring a compound called P9. Ideally, they should also, there's a simple test they can measure called viscosity. And so looking just at the blood viscosity itself. And if you have a nice, pretty picture of all those things kind of together, other things that can naturally thin the blood or keep the blood thin would be fish oil. High doses of fish oil, ginkgo can thin the blood as well. Vitamin E can thin the blood. There are certain enzymes like nattokinase that can be options. Nattokinase, a derivative of soy as well. Again, talk to your doctor about those as alternatives to blood thinner, because if the blood thinner is creating that kind of a problem and, decimating your quality of life, then, your doctor should be open to that conversation a little bit. Let's see here. Scan results came back from an MRI, worn out knee without cartilage, bone on bone, neck with glutathione. Your advice. So there's no such thing as bone on bone. You may have been told that, but you don't have bone on bone. You might have a decreased joint space, but you don't have an absence of cartilage in your knee. So it's hard for me to comment because I don't know who you are, but I'm going to give you a kind of a classic example of people that are told they have bone on bone. If you go to a surgeon, a lot of times you're going to be told you have bone on bone because surgeons want to operate, and one of their favorite things to do, and one of the most profitable things they can do is do a joint replacement. And that's not to say all surgeons are bad or all surgeons are wrong in telling you that, but one of the ways a lot of times they do these images is depending on how they did your image too, they can do these images lying down, but they can do some of these images in a weight-bearing position. And if you're doing an image in a weight-bearing position, you're going to reduce the joint space that you see upon the image. If you're doing the image in a non-gravitational position where you're lying down, you can still have reduced joint space as a result of having atrophied muscles and tight muscles. In essence, if your quadriceps and hamstrings and calf muscles are super, super tight, they compress the joint space in the knee, and they make it on an image, they make it look more compressed, and it actually can kind of look bone on bone, but you don't have an absence of cartilage. And so just understand that. Now, that being said, are there some things that you can do? First thing that you can do if you're being told you have worn away cartilage and osteoarthritis in your knee is rehabilitation, because motion is lotion for your joints. And one of the problems people suffer with in this situation is because it hurts, they quit using it. They quit walking. They stay off of it. And that's the worst possible thing you can do. You want to do targeted rehab with someone who knows what they're doing to help you rehab and get motion back into that joint so that it can begin to heal, because joints, the cartilage doesn't have a direct blood supply. It's nourished through motion and movement. So the synovium fluid that bathes that cartilage receives nutrients, and then it passes those nutrients into the cartilage, but it does so efficiently when you move it. It doesn't do so when you stop moving and when you protect it, because it hurts. So if you're trying to avoid surgery, get with good chiropractor, good physical therapist who can specialize in joint rehabilitation in that. If you want to take some supplementation to support it, ideally get a test, Yvonne, that tells you what nutrients you might be deficient in, because your cartilage is made up of a lot of different nutrients. You need omega-3, you need folate, you need vitamin C, you need zinc, you need copper, etc., for the formation of cartilage. And then there's also some supplements that can have some anti-inflammatory effects, like, for example, turmeric and MSM. We have a product called Ultra Joint, which contains glucosamine, chondroitin, and MSM that many people with osteoarthritis find extremely helpful. So, I mean, these are all just things that you can consider. Sue says, I'm taking a natural supplement to decrease uric acid and was surprised my hot flashes lessened significantly after starting the supplement. Can you explain the relationship between uric acid and hot flashes? I mean, uric acid as a general is an indicator of inflammation. And, the supplement you're taking most likely has a number of anti-inflammatory nutrients in it. And so, any time we have chronic persistent inflammation, we run a greater risk, ladies run a greater risk of more prevalent hot flashes, more aggressive hot flashes. So it's probably the anti-inflammatory benefit of that product that you're seeing help you. Suggestions for anemia depends on the kind of anemia. There's iron deficiency, there's folate deficiency, B12 deficiency, copper deficiency, B6 deficiency anemias. So, if you're trying to detect anemia, as a general rule, a simple blood test is just a complete blood count with differential. You can also run an iron panel and a ferritin if you're trying to rule out or in iron deficiency. But for the other micronutrients, you want to get a micronutrient test, because you can have an anemia that's not showing up on a CBC but still be anemic. And one of the best ways to detect that is through nutrient deficiency testing. Now, that being said, there are other markers on the CBC that can sometimes be helpful, like your MCV and your MCH. These are markers that can also indicate anemias. If you have a high MCV, it may be that it's high because your B12 or folate is low. If you have a low MCH, it could be low copper, or low B6, or low iron. So again, it's a very complicated question, TC, but that should give you some places to start. Okay, so I answered that one. What are my thoughts on HRT, hormone replacement therapy? I'm not opposed to it at all. I think it just depends on the woman and the situation and the quality of life issue that a person's facing, and the dose and how the doctor is monitoring it, and whether or not there are other risk factors involved with taking HRT for that particular woman. I think if all those things are considered intelligently, I think HRT is perfectly fine. I wouldn't use synthetic hormone replacement therapy. I would use natural, bioidentical would be your best option. I'd also there'd be some additional things you'd want to have your doctor monitor if you were doing that, and one of them would be your estrogen metabolites. There are a number of different metabolites of estrogen, or different forms of estrogen. Some of them can increase the risk for heart disease and cancer. So if you're on something like an HRT, you definitely want to make sure that you're having follow-up with that doctor to measure those other metabolites, to make sure that that HRT is not elevating certain risk estrogens. And there are certain supplements that can be supportive of HRT therapy. So, one of them would be DIM. We have a formula called Ultra DIM, and that can help with the metabolism. It supports the metabolism of estrogens, but you also need things like folate and B12 to properly metabolize estrogens. You need magnesium to properly metabolize estrogens. You also want to understand that HRT, hormone replacement therapy, can cause vitamin and mineral deficiencies when you're on it for long periods of time. So you should also be having your micronutrient status measured if you're making that decision to go on HRT. But again, I don't think there's anything wrong with doing it if it's done in the right way, and if your doctor's monitoring you in the right way. Because at the end of the day, I've seen women who had hot flashes and did some really great changes nutritionally. Hot flashes were still there, but just were bearable. They weren't life changing or life altering. And I've seen other cases where they were extremely life altering and unbearable, and so HRT was a viable solution for these women. And I don't think any woman should ever be shamed into not taking it because they're trying to just stay natural. And this is especially true of any of you who have had surgeries, like whether it be a partial hysterectomy or a full hysterectomy. Because again, when you remove your uterus and ovaries, or have had them removed, you're taking away your body's ability to produce estrogen to a large extent. You can still make some estrogen and progesterone from the adrenal glands, but you're taking away one of the main organs that are responsible for doing that. So I think it just needs to be done intelligently. And with the right compassion and the right type of monitoring. But if you understand all those things, and if your doctor that you're working with understands all those things, I think it's perfectly fine. Thoughts on infrared blankets versus a sauna? I think it just depends on the company and what kind of strength that they're advertising in their product. Because some infrared blankets are perfectly fine, just like many saunas are perfectly fine. As far as EMFs are concerned, look, we're all exposed to EMFs on a daily basis, and that's not to minimize the fact that EMFs can be problematic. But if you're not sensitive to EMFs, I wouldn't so much worry about an EMF potential from an infrared blanket or an infrared sauna if you're not overly sensitive to them, because you can walk around electrical outlets and get EMF exposure. You're probably getting EMF exposure, when you go into a public facility that has Wi-Fi. I mean, there's just a number of ways you're going to get EMF. So if you are EMF sensitive, then you should be inquiring into the EMF potential of the units that you're buying. And usually the manufacturers can give you their specifications. Let's see here. Is there a relationship between high copper levels and female hormone levels? There can be. High copper, if it's high long enough, copper actually competes with zinc. And remember, zinc is very critical for most hormones to be produced, including the sex steroids for females. So, high copper theoretically can cause a diminishment of zinc activity, which can lead to, again, a disruption of hormone production. So to answer, I hope that answers your question. High eye pressure, if you're taking, depending on what you're taking, if you're taking a steroid to reduce your eye pressure for glaucoma, just know that long-term use of steroids to the eye can actually increase the risk for blindness as well. If you've got high eye pressure, you've got to look at why that's happening. There are a number of natural things that can be done about it: diet change, lifestyle change, exercise, micronutrient supplementation according to what you need are all potential things you should explore. Laura says, I received my results from the intracellular nutrient analysis you recommended, and boy, what a game changer to find out what my body is not, why my body is not running right. Thanks for that feedback, Laura. So on that note, another question about nutrient analysis, that question was about vitamin E. What we actually are measuring on that analysis is actually what's called tocotrienol, which is vitamin E, Laura. So it's a type of vitamin E. So we are measuring it. We're just not measuring the whole family of vitamin E, but we're focused really on that tocotrienol. Is beef bone marrow good for iron? I already do beef liver. What about all of the organ meats? They're all good, really, all of the above. I have a lot of hair shedding and bone loss since I went into full menopause 4 years ago. What do you suggest as a remedy? I am gluten-free as I have celiac. So Stacy, are you gluten-free or are you grain-free? I would suggest reevaluating that aspect, because many people that are celiac that continue to eat grains like corn and rice continue to have autoimmune reactions. And one of the autoimmune reactions can actually occur against your bone. And this is where we can get aggressive bone loss. Beyond that, some of those other grains can also damage the gut, causing malabsorption of minerals that help to solidify your bones. So I would first get clarity on whether or not you're actually gluten-free in the traditional sense or grain-free. Grain-free meaning, no corn, no rice, no sorghum, no millet, no teff, no pseudo grains like amaranth, quinoa, and buckwheat, and also no oats. But beyond that, one of the biggest problems that we see in women losing their bone aggressively is a lack of protein in their total diet. This is especially true with the popularity of plant-based diets and vegan-based diets. There's a fundamental lack of protein in many people that try to get on these diets. And if you haven't counted your protein, just think of it like this: take your weight in kilograms and multiply that number by 1.5, 1.5. That's how many grams of protein you should be eating a day. And so you can download their food app counters. You can download the one we like to use is MyFitnessPal, and count for a week how much protein you're getting in a day. And if it's falling below that value, that weight in kilograms times 1.5, if you're getting less protein than that every day, you're not providing the substrate for your body to repair and facilitate bone and muscle growth. So protein would be the main thing that I would recommend that you look at. Beyond that, if your protein's low, you want to get it up, but then you want to start adding weight training. And again, not cardio training, weight training to your routine. Weight training is going to stimulate pressure on the bone. Bone grows based on pressure. There's a law called Wolff's Law, which is that very law. Again, bone grows based on pressure. And so if you don't put pressure on your bone, the density is going to diminish over time. So pressure combined with adequate protein, and make sure that your diet is truly gluten-free versus the traditional gluten-free. Let's see here. I'm 40 years old, and before I got hot flashes once every 2 months, but now I get them every month. Can it be my new job? I started 4 months ago. I work with bread and cookies. Yeah, it is possible. At one time I had a patient who worked next door to a bakery, and they shared the same air duct system. So he was in an office building adjacent in a strip mall to a bakery. He was getting wheat flour and everything else blowing into his air. And he wasn't recovering. And until we figured that out, he didn't really fully recover. But if you're gluten sensitive and you're in a bakery and you're baking bread and cookies and that dough is, fluffed up in the air and you're breathing it in on a regular basis, that absolutely could be a reason why you're having that problem. One of the things that we know about celiac and gluten sensitivity is that the average female who has gluten sensitivity, who continues to eat gluten, her fertility longevity during her life is shortened by, I think it's like 8 years, and maybe even in some cases up to 15 years. And that means early menopause, right? Because the fertility cycle is shortened in these individuals. And there's a lot of research studies that have shown that to be the case. So if you're being exposed to gluten, even through aerosolized amounts that you're breathing into your lungs, I would say yes. And you're way too young at 40 to be having hot flashes. Any suggestions for MS? A lot of suggestions. You should check out, Patty. We have some blog posts on MS and neurological disease on Gluten Free Society with in-depth information about what you can do. I would just say 2 low-hanging things that you could do right away is three. One, go gluten grain-free. Number 2, consider vitamin B12 supplementation. Number 3, consider vitamin D supplementation at higher doses. You can also ask your doctor to measure those 2 things and then supplement accordingly. But there's a lot of evidence, and I've seen this clinically as well, where a lot of people with MS do have vitamin D deficiencies and B12 deficiencies that can contribute to the demyelinization of the nerves and the progressive neuropathy that occurs with MS. From a urine toxic metal test, I tested high for barium, which can come from eating nuts, which I thought was a healthy choice. Should I stop eating nuts? I think it's a quantity issue, Bonnie. I don't know that you necessarily need to completely rule nuts out for the rest of your life, but if you were thriving on nuts as a primary staple food in your diet, then yeah, I mean, you could have been getting exposure to barium from too much. So, um, again, hard to say without knowing more specifically, more information about you. Let's see. Hi, Dr. O. My question is, I just had x-rays. My back and shoulders and neck have been having a lot of pain in those areas. Was told arthritis and a lot of arthritis in the right shoulder that I had 2 surgeries on. I eat gluten-free, dairy-free. Would chiropractic care help? Yeah, it very much could help. If you're being told this is like a degenerative aging arthritis and not an autoimmune arthritis, there are a lot of therapies good chiropractor could do: laser therapies, ultrasound therapies, something called Graston, or deep myofascial release if you've got scar adhesions in the muscles or in the soft tissues around that shoulder. All that stuff can be broken up. Red light therapies can be used. There's just a number of different things. And then there's also manipulation to stabilize motion in the joint. It's definitely worth a shot. If it were me, again, as long as you were certain it wasn't an autoimmune type of inflammatory arthritis, that those types of modalities, chiropractic modalities, could work extremely well. Is there a gluten endometriosis early menopause connection? Yes, definitely. We have an article on that. I think it's on Gluten Free Society, how gluten can affect your hormones. Can we put that link up for Trish? Yeah, I mean, Trish, there's definitely a connection, and it's a good idea, if you don't already know if you're gluten sensitive, to get tested for sure. If you need that confirmation. Some people do and some people don't. I found over the years that a lot of people are just willing to change their diet and never look back, but a lot of people aren't. And what the people that aren't, and you know more about yourself than I do, but if you're the kind of person that can just walk away and never look back and be okay with it, more power to you. But if you know yourself and you're going to sneak in a cookie here or there, you really should get tested to get confirmation, so that you can have the knowledge that it's absolutely, beyond a shadow of a doubt, the right thing for you to do without creating future problems. Remember that people with gluten sensitivity who don't go gluten free, I shared this the other day, there's some research that shows there's almost a 400% increase in early mortality in people who are gluten sensitive who don't eat on a gluten free diet. And so that's not a good thing. Obviously, we don't want to die early. I'm 40 and I can't have a bowel movement without a lot of magnesium oxide. How do I lessen the need for that? Figure out why you're not having a bowel movement, Sharon. There's a lot of reasons that can happen. Aside from kind of the classic simple stuff that so many people talk about, like drinking enough water or having fiber, those are things. If you're gluten sensitive, one of the things that gluten can do is it can create paralysis of the bowels. And so there's a condition called gastroparesis that can occur as a result, and that can cause chronic constipation. So if you're not gluten free, you might consider getting tested for gluten to see if that's part of your issue. Other food allergies can also do it. If you have a yeast overgrowth in your bowels as well, that can cause or drive constipation. So number of potential possibilities. If you're using magnesium oxide, that's just pulling water into your bowel. And as far as using it, there's no real danger in using it. The real danger is not figuring out why you have constipation, because if there's something more serious underlying that reason, that's what you really want to get solved. But I would start with those things, looking at diet, looking at food as potentials. Is it normal to have a fairly consistent, very slight night sweat episode at 72 years of age? It's possible. Very slight night sweat. I mean, that could be just something as simple as the temperature of the room is too high at night. one of the things that your body wants to do at night is it wants for deep sleep is your core temperature needs to go down. This is for some people that don't sleep very well at night. This is one of the things that this is one of the reasons why is their core temperature is not coming down accordingly. So one of the things that you can do, one of the things that you can try, Diana, is take a hot Epsom salt bath before bedtime. What that does is that stay in that hot water long enough to where you've got sweat coming out on your forehead. And then when you get out, what will happen is your body will engage a natural reflexive response to start dropping your temperature, because when you heat to the point of sweat, your body's now going to try to bring that temperature down so that when you get in bed, your core temperature drops appropriately and you can sleep, and you might find that you don't have those night sweats. The other thing is you might just check your thermostat, because if your thermostat is set too high, and that's a relative, right? But a lot of people sleep better around 68 degrees Fahrenheit at night. And so just checking your thermostat and seeing if manipulating that and seeing if there's any benefit there. I'm not sure I understand that. What tea do you recommend or not recommend? I'm not against tea, and I'm not necessarily for tea. I think if you like tea, have some tea. I think more than anything, just make sure that the quality of the tea is good, that it's organic, and that it's not mold contaminated, and that it's not in some kind of a plastic based sack that emanates, phthalates into the drinking water. I like if I'm going to drink tea, I like loose leaf teas for that reason, use my own little tea ball. But because a lot of these tea bags can be, bleached and contain ingredients I just don't want to drink, but I'm not really opposed to tea one way or the other or for it. A comment here from Christine. I discovered my drenching sweat episodes every night was babesia. And I'm glad you make that comment, because that certainly can be the case. And infection can definitely be a reason for night flashes, babesia being a type of infection. What do you think about supplementing with testosterone? It's supposed to be the last hormone to fail. I'm not a fan. Look, I know a lot of people do it, and this is not me passing judgment one way or the other. But if you're talking about supplementation of testosterone, before I would recommend that somebody have that type of treatment done, I would first want to evaluate them thoroughly. And the reason why is you might be in a situation where you lack the nutrients to produce your own testosterone, or where you're eating foods that are testosterone blockers, or where you have an underlying issue that's causing a disruption in your body's ability to make testosterone. If you don't investigate those things first and you jump straight into testosterone replacement therapies, you miss an opportunity to fix some very serious potential underlying problems. And to me, that's where I don't agree with just jumping right to taking something like testosterone. In my experience, and this is true of both men and women, you can improve your hormone output tremendously with diet and lifestyle change. I've seen cases where men have come in and they're 150 in their testosterone, and we get it up over 1,000 just with diet and lifestyle change. So I'm not a fan of just jumping to the drug first. I'm a bigger fan of what can we do to help your body naturally be able to make its own testosterone. Now, if all that fails for whatever reasons, far be it for me to judge, improving your quality of life with modern technology. But again, I just wouldn't start with that as the primary. Testosterone blocking foods for men, Chris, would be things like heavy amounts of soy, eating and drinking off of plastics. So although those aren't technically foods, the plastics have estrogenic compounds in them. Eating anything that's not organic, because the pesticides have, many of them mimic estrogen, and so they're going to affect a man's testosterone. I am firmly of the belief that one of the reasons today we see so many sexually confused individuals is people are going to hate me for saying this, but I'm going to say it anyway because I believe in honesty and transparency. we have a massive assault on our hormones, and that assault begins in utero when women get pregnant. When women get pregnant, if they're not eating well, and if they're being exposed to all kinds of chemical, what are called xenobiotics, which are compounds that mimic estrogen, this is happening. These things are coming into that baby that's trying to grow. And if that baby's male, you're going to end up with a less manly man at the end of the day. And even after the baby has been incubated for 9 months, when it comes out, it's being exposed to a variety of different environmental chemicals and toxins that mimic estrogens. And we know this happens. We're certain that this happens in the fish, the frogs, the salamanders, the amphibious creatures, where there are certain areas, especially in where farmers are dumping their chemicals. One particular type of chemical is called atrazine. And what it does is it chemically castrates male frogs and fish. And so what do we think is going to happen when we're exposing our children to this for decades? Of course, we're going to have sexual variance problems in their capacity to manage and mitigate their own hormones. Anyway, all that being said, that's why it's important to throw the plastic nonsense away, because that's all estrogen mimicking garbage. Ladies, it's important that you understand that the cosmetics that you choose to use, if they're full of these estrogen mimicking chemicals and you're pregnant, it can create, again, those exposures for your child. Your skin is it's the largest organ in your body, and it absorbs what you put on it. So you've got to keep all that in mind. That's why I don't, again, a lot of people will call me an alarmist, but look at where we're at. Look at where we're at. The world is crazy. It's bipolar. Up is down and down is up. And you have so many people that are confused. And, the people that have stood the most to gain are the people that are selling you highly toxic, highly processed food that are produced in these manners. And the chemicals they're wrapping that food in is also profitable for them. So, profit at the cost of human health is in my opinion, is bad business. And I think we need to go back to fundamentals. Anyway, end of rant. We'll move on. Let's see here. What do you mean by organic food? I mean food that's grown without the use of chemical pesticides that aren't good for human consumption. So ideally, organic food would be, you wouldn't even really need an organic food label. You'd be growing your own garden. I am a realist, and I realize most people aren't going to do that. But there are organic food co-ops. Many cities have them, where you have group gardens, and so many people tend the garden, and everybody pitches in. And in the outcome of that is food that's grown locally during the season and grown near you that doesn't have chemical pesticides in it. You can buy organic food at the grocery store. Some would argue there's a trust issue with that, and not all of it is as clean as what we've been told. And I would agree to a certain extent of that. I think you have to start somewhere, and I think organic in the grocery store is better than conventional in the grocery store. But I think ideally, organic co-op would be the next best choice, and then beyond that would be to have your own garden. Lori asks, I ordered Ultra Balance. Is it okay to take your multi-nutrient supplement as well? Yeah, they're fine to take together. Menopausal women, which would be those foods? Anything that causes insulin resistance? I think what causes insulin resistance for most people is a lack of chromium in their diet, and a lack of activity and exercise, combined with an overabundant carbohydrate-filled diet, meaning they're eating too many carbs, they're not getting enough minerals, and they're also not getting enough activity. And so their body is trying to overcompensate for that by producing more insulin. And over time, that insulin stops working as well, and you become insulin resistant. As far as like which exact food causes insulin resistance, I think the best place to start is to say any kind of highly processed, simple carbohydrate food that you might be consuming, including fruit juices. Tracy says, I also get extreme hair shedding after having a hysterectomy, partial hysterectomy. I am on a bare minimum of HRT therapy. Otherwise, I bottom out completely on hormones. So I'm not sure if there's a question in that, but if you've got extreme hair loss, I would encourage you to, if you're on the bare minimum of HRT, have your levels monitored and checked. Make sure also that your B vitamins are up to speed, because in order to utilize hormones properly, you need B vitamins to do that, and you need magnesium to do that. So some women have B vitamin and magnesium deficiency are taking HRT. The HRT doesn't work as well, or they become more symptomatic as a result of being on it. And sometimes that's the reason why. So look at those things as well. Also, as I mentioned before, check your protein level. A lot of the hair loss that I see, the vast majority of it is people over time not eating adequate protein. And so hair is made out of protein, and your body does not prioritize hair growth over the protein necessary to run the rest of you. So really look at that protein level and make sure you're getting enough. Natural foods to consume for brain fog. I don't think there's a particular food that you're going to eat that's going to solve your brain fog, as much as there are particular foods that you might be eating that are creating or contributing to your brain fog. At least that's been my experience. There's not like a superfood that, hey, eat this superfood and your brain fog goes away. I mean, unless that food contains like a specific micronutrient that you're extremely low in. As an example, many people with magnesium deficiency develop brain fog. You need magnesium. Your brain cells need magnesium to function and communicate. So, you might find that eating rich foods in magnesium could help a particular individual. But again, we're trying to stay as generic as possible. But there's not like a superfood for brain fog that I would say works for everyone. Notice my nipples are very tender. I'm 51 years young. Got my hot flashes under control, eating more collards and 2 dates before bed. You might try progesterone or iodine if you're having tenderness in your nipple area, Michelin. 2 things that are largely associated with that. Partial hysterectomy at age 25. Still have my ovaries. Will my menopause process be less acute because of this? Hard to say. I think everybody's a unique individual. I wouldn't go into it with any preconceived thoughts. Don't in other words, don't create the paradigm of fear, so that as you're going into it, that becomes your reality. But it's really hard to say. I'd say if you're taking really great care of yourself, you still have your ovaries, so going in, you should be just fine if you're taking good care of yourself in other ways. Thanks for your comment, Marie. She says, it helped following your protocol, no grain, no pain, when I was going through menopause. What foods can I get copper from? Lots of them. Any kind of meat. Oysters are really high in copper. And as far as chromium, nuts, meats have chromium in them. A number of different leafy veggies contain both of those. You should check out, Reagan, check out our crash courses on copper and chromium to learn more in depth about that. Let's see, I don't have low thyroid, but have antibodies attacking my thyroid. I'm following the no grain, no pain diet and have ordered genetic testing from you. What else can I do to try to keep this under control? Might consider nutrient testing. One of the, I just recently did a show on this, but selenium deficiency and inositol, those are 2. So selenium's a mineral and inositol is a B vitamin-like compound. And both of them have been studied and researched to be effective in research studies on humans to actually lower thyroid antibodies. So you might consider inositol and selenium. You might also consider getting them tested to see if you're low. If diabetes is not a concern, is it better to eat fruit with or away from a meal for gut health? Everyone's different that way. As far as timing patterns, a lot of the nuance and study on timing patterns is it's just not great research, and so there's not really, Tammy, a fantastic answer. I would argue if you're trying to prevent the spike, you know, in terms of blood sugar or blood glucose after fruit, one of the best things you can do is just go for a little walk, and that helps tremendously. But as far as timing, eating it with or without a meal, I haven't seen anything clinically or in research that says this is the perfect way to go about doing it. I'm on HRT, but I'm feeling flat, irritable, and itching skin with palpitations. Yeah, you need to talk with your doctor about those symptoms and probably have your levels checked. You could be on too strong of a dose. You could have a problem with your liver. That itching skin like that sometimes is manifest as a result of the liver struggling to metabolize medications. And so if you have like a pre-existing fatty liver and you're just not aware of it, you can get a liver ultrasound. If you have elevated liver enzymes, that could give you some insight as well, but I certainly would look into those things. Is L-butartrate an acceptable form of choline for non-alcoholic fatty liver disease? It's not my favorite kind. I like choline citrate if we're talking about, you know, arguably the best type of choline. Robert. What do you think of budesonide for Crohn's or colitis? I think anytime you're using drugs to suppress the symptoms of your autoimmune disease, you're missing the point of this show. The point of the show is, if I could succinctly put it, disease is a manifestation in all people. If you have, and this is true of really of any inflammatory disease, but in autoimmune disease, symptoms are a manifestation that your body is trying to communicate to you that you're doing it wrong, right? So if you suppress those symptoms with a drug, you're basically suppressing your body's alarm system as the criminal is invading your house. So, you know, symptoms should be looked at and approached in a different way than what mainstream medicine deals with it. This is my opinion. This is what I've seen over several decades of practice work best. Because drugs don't resolve disease. Now, there are certain scenarios where drugs are necessary. Certainly, there are certain scenarios where medical care can be extremely helpful, but it shouldn't be the end-all be-all solution. That being said, what do I think of budesonide for inflammatory bowel disease? I think if you have inflammatory bowel disease, you need to figure out why. What are your triggers? There are 4 categorical triggers for autoimmune inflammatory disease: food, chemical exposures, microbial imbalances, and vitamin and mineral deficiencies. Those 4 categories, if you get those tested, you get those figured out, you may find yourself in a place where you no longer need budesonide to manage your symptoms. I'm perimenopause, but get a lot of symptoms despite being on HRT, then you're probably missing something, and micronutrient testing might be super helpful for you. Again, ask your doctor to measure your hormone levels. I see this so frequently where women are taking HRT and they've just been on it, and their doctors never check up on them. They just say, come back next year. And when they come back next year, they don't measure anything. There's no objective measurement to make sure that your levels are not being you're not being over medicated, or that you're not being under medicated. And so, you know, those are good places to start. What's your take on coffee and hormones in menopause? I think a little coffee is fine for most people. Now, some people are reactive to caffeine, or super sensitive to caffeine, and some people are allergic to coffee, and some people have GI problems, and so coffee's an irritant. But I think we have to answer that question more on a case-by-case basis. Ken asks, before I do nutrient deficiency tests, should I stop taking vitamins or supplements? Not if you're using the one from Gluten-Free Society. It will not, that test will give you an average the last 6 months. It's not affected by what you're currently taking on a day-to-day basis. Now, if you're going into your doctor's office and you're running a bunch of serum lab tests, yes, stop taking those supplements a week before, because all it's going to happen is most things are going to come back high. Your doctor's going to tell you you're toxic in vitamins and tell you to stop all your supplements, because they don't understand how supplements work and how nutrient serum testing is inaccurate and can be manipulated very quickly by just one day of supplementation. Yeah, so my cycle's never been regular in my life. Thought I was starting menopause. I'm 43, but cycle has now been regular for about 6 months. Is there a way to confirm menopause? Yeah, you can. One of the ways that is ask your doctor to measure. There's 2 tests. One's called FSH, that stands for follicle stimulating hormone. The other's called LH, that stands for luteinizing hormone. And those 2 things will be extremely high when a woman starts to go into menopause. And so those 2 tests can be confirmatory. Oh, I like this comment. Nancy says, I'm 71 and I'll get hot flashes if I have any sugar, including gummy vitamins. Yeah, sugar's a big trigger. Thanks for chiming in, Nancy. I eat organic, gluten-free, vegetarian diet. I have no symptoms of menopause. All right, good. Went carnivore and all menopause symptoms went away. No more hot flashes, migraines, or mood swings. So isn't that interesting, right? So one person says I follow a gluten-free vegetarian diet and no menopause symptoms. The next person says I went carnivore and all my symptoms went away. So you could see the dichotomy there, right? Both people are right. Like neither one of those individuals' experiences are wrong. They both feel better and they both feel good and they're eating completely the opposite type of diet. So let that sink in, because a lot of people are looking for a one size fits all, and it just never works that way. There are generalized truths about health, but you know, as the adage goes, one person's food is another person's poison. Can mold and stress contribute to weight gain, brain fog, and hot flashes? Yes. Are headaches that occur every month around your cycle normal? No. Melissa, consider magnesium the week before your cycle, anywhere from 400 to 600 milligrams. Maybe we can put up some mold video info for Froxy. Is there a way to get adenosylcobalamin, methylcobalamin, and methylfolate all in one supplement? There may be a company out there but it's not common to see a company use both methyl and adenosylcobalamin in a combined form. Usually they'll pick one over the other. As far as methylfolate, we have something called Ultra B12, and it has methylfolate, and not what you're asking for, and hydroxycobalamin and pyridoxal 5-phosphate in it. So it's that particular formula is really designed for people who can't handle the high levels of methylated B12, but that's not what you're asking. But I don't know of a product that contains those 3. Is amphotericin B nasal spray safe as a treatment to clear mold in a body that's causing mycotoxin? No, so the question doesn't maybe make sense. Have you confirmed that you have mold growing in your sinuses as a potential source of mold toxins coming out in your urine? A lot of doctors want to prescribe these nasal sprays, these antifungal nasal sprays, without actually culturing the sinuses to confirm whether or not there's mold growing in them. So it's not that it isn't ineffective medicine for that, or it can't be, but it's, did you get tested appropriately to know that that's your problem? I'm celiac and I'm grain-free. Do you have any idea why I'm getting plantar fasciitis and what I can do to cure it? Yeah. There are a lot of reasons why it can happen, Lorraine. If you're one is if you're overweight. If you're overweight, you put a tremendous amount of pressure on your Achilles tendon, which can contribute to plantar fasciitis. So if you're overweight, consider strategies to lose it. Now, if you've got plantar fasciitis, and that makes exercise a little bit harder, but you can still exercise having plantar fasciitis. You just have to modify your workout program so that you can still try to achieve the goal of weight loss. Again, I don't know whether you're overweight or whether you're not, but that's something that I think just needs to be said. Now, beyond that, a lot of people develop plantar fasciitis because their gastrocnemius and soleus muscles are extremely tight. And one of the reasons that can happen, and again, this is simple thing, but if you tuck your sheets at the edge of your bed and then you get in bed at night and you're sleeping and your toes are pointed when you're sleeping at night, what that does is it balls up your calf muscle and it can make it tight over time. So we'll see a lot of people that sleep with the sheets tucked at the edge of the bed have really tight calves. And that can, again, that puts more pressure on the Achilles tendon, which can contribute to plantar fasciitis. So consider that. Untuck the sheets at the base of the bed if you're doing that. You also might consider different stretches for your calves. There are a number of different, just YouTube calf stretches for humans, right? YouTube that, and you're going to find a lot of potential great stretches that you can perform, and even assessments that you can perform on yourself to see if you do have really tight calves. But if you can't bend over and touch your toes, you have tight calves. Not just tight hamstrings, but also tight calves. And those are probably some of the biggest reasons I'll see people develop plantar fasciitis if it's not food related. Now, if you're already grain free, you could be reacting to some other foods as well, but I would start with the physical flexibility of your calf muscles as a thought behind why you're having that issue first. Let's see here. Is a short course of budesonide for Crohn's and colitis dangerous? My doctor suggested it because I have persistent inflammation. I mean, it comes with risks. Talk with your doctor about the risk benefit of being on that medication, Kat. If he suspects you have microbial colitis, then he needs to be running a stool culture on you to see which microbes are driving that process. And then he needs, instead of focusing on anti-inflammation, he needs to be focusing on antimicrobial treatments. But, again, there's always, with any medicine, there's a risk benefit, and you just have to weigh it. Is the risk, greater than the benefit for you? But you've got to be able to have that conversation with him first. Now, if your doctor's not having that kind of conversation with you, you can also have that conversation with with the pharmacist where you fulfill your prescription, and you can ask for a consultation. And they by law are supposed to provide you with a risk benefit analysis of any medicine that you're taking. How does caffeine affect the menstrual cycle, and how much is too much? It varies from person to person, but caffeine is a stimulant and it stimulates adrenaline release. And so from one perspective, it really puts a lot of pressure on your adrenal output. And that can absolutely impact menstruation in a lot of different ways. For a lot of women, it can create PMS-like symptoms. So predominantly what's called PMSA, which is associated with the anxiety around your cycle. But also it can potentiate a lot of headache and excessive cramping. So if you really cramp really severely and find yourself reaching for pain medicine every cycle because the cramps are so bad, you want to consider looking at caffeine as a predominant trigger. Is there any way to delay menopause, and is there any link between sex hormone binding globulin levels and menopause onset? I haven't seen any great linkage between SHBG and menopause, because SHBG goes up with bad behavior. So, too high of an SHBG can contribute to a reduced function of your hormones, but that's largely behaviorally based. As far as delaying menopause, don't think of it as a delayed menopause as much as you think of it as a healthy sex span. And the reason I say that is because menopause signifies for a woman that she's no longer going to be able to give birth to more children going forward. So when I use that term healthy sex span, I mean very much that. The purpose of sex, biologically speaking, again, just strictly biologically speaking, is to rear children, right? It's to impregnate. So you're not going to expand that per se. You're just going to have a healthy span of capacity for that. And the best way to do that is to eat right for you, exercise, good sunshine, good sleep, good stress mitigation. Make sure you're eating enough total calories and not too much. And make sure you're drinking clean water and breathing clean air. Like those are fundamentals for anyone, right? We could argue those are what I would call the non-negotiable fundamentals of good health. And if you do those things consistently throughout your life, then you'll have an appropriate menopause. You'll have a time appropriate menopause for you. If you don't do those things, depending on how bad you don't do them, there is an association with early menopause. And so, if we want to expand our span of fertility, so to speak, then you do the things that are necessary to keep you healthy. Will it be harder for me to build and maintain muscle mass when I reach menopause? For some, yes, because you do have a slowing down of hormone. You can have a slowing down of certain hormone production. But going into menopause with good muscles is one of the antidotes to that. And that's why it's so important to start today and not wait until you're in it. How long to be free from eczema and grain-free? Oxalates can be a problem also, ? I eat food every day that's high in oxalate if I breathe in gluten every day, but not eating. I think this is Anna's the same person that is working in the bakery or working around the breads and cakes. So if you're gluten sensitive, it's not a good place for you to be working. And I would find an exit strategy out of that job. It's a bad idea. Maybe oxalates are your problem. Maybe they're not. It's hard to say. It's very much a possibility. There are a lot of people that do struggle with oxalates. And so you could measure your oxalates, certainly. And if they're high, that would give you some insider clue in as to maybe going on a low oxalate diet combined with that grain-free diet might be a better move for you, but certainly be oxalate conscious. My sister had her tubes cut after delivering the third baby to avoid a fourth pregnancy. Will this affect hormones in the long run? Well, she had the tubes cut, but she didn't have her ovaries impacted, so probably not. Again, the greatest impact on a woman's or man's hormones in the long run is how they behave. It's how they treat their bodies and how they behave. Foods or nutrients that help increase testosterone. Oysters, zinc, selenium, rich foods. Proteins are going to be very important. Vitamin C is going to be very important. Vitamin B5 is going to be very important for testosterone. So all those things. This goes back to, test, don't guess. This is just kind of my mantra. Measure those things so that you know what it is that your body needs so that you can focus on that instead of just focusing on a shotgun approach of trying everything. Let's see here. I just started perimenopause and I'm gaining a lot of weight. I'm already a 5 to 6 day a gym person with weight training, Pilates, and low intensity cardio. I do intermittent fasting and clean keto help. This may sound overly simple to answer your question, but do you count your calories? If you're gaining weight, do you count your calories and your macros? A lot of women in my experience, going into perimenopause who are following even clean keto can gain weight, and the fat, it just becomes too much. The fat content of the diet becomes too much. So consider that. But also consider total caloric intake if that's changed. One of the best exercises a person can do when they're gaining weight and they don't know why is just do a very quick 7-day count of your total calorie per day intake along with your macronutrient ratios. So like your total calories plus what percentage of those calories is fat, carb, and protein, and just calculate that for 7 days. And then what you can do from there is figure out what your BMR, your basic metabolic rate is. You can do that. You do a Google search, and there are a number of different formulas and calculators you can use online to try to get a good estimate for what yours is based on your age and your weight and your height, etc. And start there, because I see that so frequently be the issue with women gaining weight around that perimenopausal time. I also see one of the issues is oftentimes that There's a food sensitivity or a food allergy that's driving that process. And so diet change is sometimes necessary for the proper course of action, because some of that weight gain can be water or inflammatory water weight or inflammatory visceral fat. I have hypochlorhydria. I have to take 3 grams of HCl with pepsin before meals from PPI, proton pump inhibitor antibiotic overuse. Can the stomach acid return? Yeah, it can. You got to give it time. Depends on how many years you were on those PPIs, because PPIs also inhibit some of the nutrients, absorption of some of the nutrients that are necessary to help you make stomach acid. So can really a good idea for you to get micronutrient tested to make sure you have the right nutrients to make stomach acid, because sometimes it's not about removing the drug only. Sometimes it's about removing the drug, but then replacing what the drug was taking away from you for so many years. Can gluten cause vagus nerve issues? Yes. Gluten's a neurotoxin. Vagus nerve and any other nerve for that matter can be impacted by gluten for people who are gluten sensitive. I like this comment. Carolina says, thank you so much for all the information and helping us always to not feel like we're alone and crazy. I can't touch or even eat anything that has gluten without getting hot flashes. Thank you for sharing your experience. So many that are here that are experiencing hot flashes and aren't gluten-free might benefit tremendously from that comment. Can menopause influence thyroid hormone? Yes, it can. Reason for high platelets and low vitamin D? Lots of them. If you've got high platelets and you're not gluten-free, consider it, because gluten can definitely cause elevation in platelets. It can also cause thrombocytopenia, a reduction in platelets. Low vitamin D, maybe you're not eating enough vitamin D foods. Maybe you don't get enough sunshine. Maybe you have internal inflammation that's burning through your vitamin D at a faster pace, so your levels stay low. It could be a lot of things. I had gastroparesis and have been gluten-free for 10 years. Why would that create hot flashes? Why would what create hot flashes? Not sure I understand your question, Susan. My sister was tested for gluten and she is allergic. She didn't totally stop gluten. Now she has dementia at age 73. Sorry to hear that, Nancy. My daughter has a big problem with constipation while she's pregnant. Is that common? It can be. I mean, it's not common for every single woman, but constipation can go up during pregnancy. And one of the reasons is the baby's occupying the space, creating pressure. So absolutely. I mean, it's tough with pregnancy because there's certain things that would work well when you're not pregnant to help alleviate constipation that you just wouldn't want to do during pregnancy, because these things can stimulate contraction and can stimulate premature pushing. But a couple of things that she might try, one would be increasing magnesium as a supplement. It can pull water into the bowel and might help her have better bowel movements. The other would be adding vitamin C in the same fashion at higher doses. Higher doses from 3 to 5 grams a day for a lot of people is enough on the vitamin C front to really pull water into the bowel and get a better movement with pregnancy-induced constipation. Do you have a gluten-free society certification program for medical? We used to, we don't anymore. I found that doctors would come through the program, they'd go through it, and then they really wouldn't practice it. And we had a database of practitioners who'd gone through the program, and then we'd get complaints back from people who would go visit those doctors because those doctors wouldn't apply what they learned to get their certification. So it was just really, really challenging. I don't want to be responsible for the behavior of other doctors. And I don't want to have a certification program with our stamp of approval, for doctors who aren't actually applying, what they learned through our certification program. So we do have a glutenology master class, which is taught at a very high level. I mean, I tried to simplify it to make it understandable by the average person, but there's a lot of technical in that as well. So if you're a practitioner and you're really just trying to get a vast and deep understanding of the science around this topic, check it out at glutenology.net/registration. Estrogen replacement help. Doctor said I can't have it or cancer might return. Any thoughts? A lot of thoughts. I mean, if you've got a cancer positive breast cancer history, or I said that wrong. If you have a estrogen positive breast cancer history, I could see where your doctor might have a concern about putting you on any estrogen replacement therapy. That being said, I have a different philosophy and a different opinion, and that is that I think most breast cancers are not caused by a woman's natural estrogen production. I think most of the cancer risk that we see today is caused by diet, lifestyle, behavior, and exposure to cancer mimicking compounds like phthalates, the plastics, the pesticides, et cetera. And I think those pose a far greater risk of a woman's breast cancer development than any HRT ever could, unless the doctor's just blatantly overdosing you with HRT without monitoring you. But a lot of doctors are just gun shy. They're really scared to go in that direction because for them on the back end, what patients don't see is there's tremendous liability and there's tremendous pressure from the board communities to frown upon that type of thing. So that's where you'll run into resistance. You might, look for a functional doc who specializes in hormone replacement therapy, as opposed to just a general OB-GYN, and see if you can get somebody to have a conversation with you about it. I had 7 pregnancies myself. My daughter not only exercises, but she has an almost 2-year-old that she chases constantly. Oh. Just a comment there. Yeah, I'm not sure I understand that question. My testosterone is 12. My HRT has some testosterone in it. I had a total hysterectomy in 01. What should it be for a 60-year-old woman? It depends on whether you're talking about testosterone or free testosterone. Because that matters quite a bit. I use olive oil as a moisturizer all over my body. Can it be the cheaper kind, or do I need to get organic and extra virgin? I'd get organic and extra virgin, because if you get the cheaper kind and it's fake and you're rubbing seed oil that's got pesticide in it all over your body, your skin's going to absorb that. That's no bueno. Okay, let's see here. Can you get celiac or other diseases with menopause? Are they more triggers by menopause? So I'm not sure if I understand your question fully, but it sounds like you're asking me, is menopause a trigger for celiac disease? And I would argue no. Celiac disease is a manifestation of gluten sensitivity. It's an autoimmune response that can lead to early menopause, but menopause is not going to cause you to react to gluten. I don't know if I answered your question, but that's just the way I read it. Do you accept sponsorship offers in general? I don't know what you mean by sponsorship. Do we take money from outside sources? No, we don't. That's something I feel pretty adamant about. I know my message is true and authentic, and I know my message is honest. And sponsorships cloud that. I think when you involve money, sponsorships have expectations or come with expectations, and we can see that. I just published a video recently on the corruption with the American Dietetic Association accepting money from Oreo cookies and other junk food company producers like Coca-Cola, and to me that's what sponsorship opens the door for. We don't need sponsors. That's not to say you might not have a good product, but it's just not something we do. Are women in menopause more sensitive to food allergies? Not necessarily. When I wake up, I shake till about noon. I don't know what the question is. That kind of internal tremor shaking is oftentimes linked to vagus nerve problems. It can be linked to chronic fight or flight. So, I mean, there's a host of different things that can put a person in chronic fight or flight, including the wrong foods, including certain deficiencies, including certain infections, including, I see that a lot with mold, but I don't know if that helps you. Can a person be allergic to Epsom salt? No. There might be added ingredients in that Epsom salt, would be my thought. If you felt like you had a reaction to Epsom salt, because Epsom salt is magnesium sulfate. You might have a molybdenum deficiency and so therefore struggle with sulfate, but no, you're not going to be allergic per se. Supplementing with your B1. I'm also taking a good B complex with additional B12, a type you recommend. What dose is okay for what? What dose is okay for B12? It just depends. Allison, you can, if you're trying to megadose it, anywhere from 2,000 to 10,000 micrograms a day is a range where you're taking a lot more than the RDA on purpose, right? So, but again, I'm not sure if that was what your question was. Why did I get a black spot in my chest after giving birth and breastfeeding for almost 3 years? Hard to say. I'd have to see the spot. Don't send me pictures, but I mean, there's a lot of reasons that something like that could happen. Nutrition relationships are very common when we see skin tone changes like that. So micronutrient testing would be a good place to start. I had a partial hysterectomy at 41. At times have terrible hot flashes. I do have hair loss. I do have hypothyroidism and deal with adrenal fatigue. Is there a way to know the cause? Yeah. I mean, there's definitely a way to know the causes. Lisa, I would argue, because again, I can only theorize and speculate, but if you had to have a partial hysterectomy at the age of 41, it's because there was a hormone balance back then, tremendously so. And so most likely you have a gluten issue because you also have hypothyroid, which is largely associated with gluten exposure. Adrenal fatigue is not so much a disease as it is an outcome of exposing your body to stressors over a long enough period of time where adrenal glands can't keep up with the demand. But that's really the best I can do with, on that short paragraph. I've been binge watching your videos for the past week. What's the most important macronutrient for the brain? Brain likes it all. Look, for those of you who may not be religious or spiritual, maybe this isn't the right channel for you if that's the case, but no offense. But God created carbs, fats, and proteins for a reason. We see a lot of trends online about, going 100% one way or the other, taking carbs all the way out, taking fat all the way out, low fat, no fat, low carb, no carb. What has been the consequence of these variable diet recommendations that are an imbalanced recommendation is we get imbalance. And so I believe the brain needs it all. The brain needs carbs, it needs fats, it needs proteins. Now, some doctors would argue till they're blue in the face with me about that, but I just don't think those macronutrients would exist if they weren't important as a fuel source. And I've just, that's the other thing. A lot of people that are online, like the difference is they're academics, right? They read books and they theorize, but they're not practicing clinicians. They don't practice. They don't actually have any experience with the theories that they're reading about or hypothesizing about. And so it's great to be a thinker and it's great to hypothesize. But I think a lot of these experts and influencers are disadvantaged because they're academic and not real world experience. And I think that's what makes for a much greater understanding. You've all probably had an experience in school where you read something out of a textbook, but in the real world, it didn't quite work out that way. Socialism is a classic example. It doesn't create a perfect utopia the way the textbook might read it or make it sound. And it's that way with health and health advice and nutrition advice. It's like there's no one size fits all. We're all very unique. And so to make a claim that, carbs are more important for the brain than fat or vice versa, I think is just short-sighted. So I know I didn't answer your question exactly, Nancy, but I think it's important that you understand the context there. How can I find a doctor that understands all this? Interviews, that's a tough question. I mean, I've been practicing 22 years this year, actually 23 years this year, come June. And I know what I know, and what I know is not everything for sure. I definitely have limits to my knowledge, and I'm not an expert in everything, but I love this stuff. I breathe it, I drink it, I sleep it. I commit every week, 10 to 20 hours in research time on top of what I already know. And I've been doing that for 23 years, actually 25 years, going through grad school. I did it. And it's hard to find somebody who in this realm, in this arena, who feels that way about it. So the best advice I could give you is find a doctor who, if you're looking for somebody, who eats, breathes, and sleeps this stuff and actually still practices and doesn't, retire early. It's hard to find one. It's hard to find them. In today's world, it's so insurance driven and it's so corrupt and it's so financially driven that what you end up having are a lot of doctors who aren't in it for the right reasons, or you have a lot of doctors who are just inexperienced because there's no formal training programs for this type of stuff and you can't teach passion. You can teach biochemistry, but if they're not passionate about it, they're not going to have mastery over it. So it's a hard one. I know it's a hard ask. I mean, when I go to conferences all over the world, I go to conferences every year, and I would argue there may be a few hundred doctors that I know, and I'm sure there are more than this, but just in my own small world experience, that I would say are really good, really passionate doctors, similar to me, maybe nuanced in different ways, but it's just a hard thing because there's just not a lot of us out there. Functional medicine, functional nutrition is hard. It's a lot of biochemistry. It's a lot of reading. It's a lot of application. And it's one of those things like a fine wine. It gets better with time. The more experience the doctor gets, the better they are. And there were things I was doing 20 years ago. Now I look back on and think I should have been doing it maybe this way, or because I've gotten better and I've done better and learned more and had patients teach me a lot of things as time has gone on. And I think that's a huge challenge. And when you have something that hit us the last few years where where the system that's so corrupt put doctors in such an uncanny position that the doctors who were willing enough to stand up and be honest and truthful were then demonized, ostracized, cut off from their funding. A lot of the really, really great ones are retiring because they want nothing to do with this corporate nonsense that they're calling healthcare. And that's the struggle and the frustration with many of you, I know. And I'm sorry I don't have a perfect answer. We do our best. I'm getting ready to train a protege, and then I'm hoping, and pray for me, keep your fingers crossed, because my youngest son is I think going on the same trajectory, and so I'm hoping to mentor him for the next generation of folks. But again, it's just a tough one. Let's see here. Menopause and joint pain, especially recovering from strength training, what helps? One of the things that you might consider getting checked, Kimby, is your DHEA. I see a lot of menopausal women with very, very low DHEA levels, and they struggle to exercise because of it. They struggle to recover from their exercise. And so you might just consider asking your doctor to measure your DHEA. You can buy DHEA as an over-the-counter supplement, but I wouldn't supplement with it without measuring it first, because some women also don't feel very well taking DHEA if they don't need it. So definitely get it tested. Going to the hospital to do an allergy test, is the dot arm test good? You mean the skin prick test? I'm not a fan of them. I think they can be very misleading in a lot of ways for a lot of reasons. Blood tests for IgE are better if we're talking about pure allergies. But the problem, with most doctors and hospitals is they're going to test you for the 8 common allergens. They'll test you for dairy and milk and soy and peanut, et cetera, but they're not going to do anything comprehensive typically. So, but if you have a good doctor, talk to them about measuring and the array of foods, not just the 8 most common allergens, because most of the tests that I've seen done by allergists and immunologists, including in the hospitals, they check for molds and danders and ragweed and things of that nature. And then they check for the 8 foods, but those 8 foods, I mean, that's just an ounce in the bucket of the variety of foods you probably eat. And so you could be missing some key information. How many days before my doctor takes my blood test should I stop taking your supplements to get a true reading? If he's doing serum lab testing, 7 days is a really safe window. But just understand, Lorraine, that if your doctor's doing serum testing, you're wasting your blood. That's just my opinion of it. Serum tests are not worth the vital blood that you would give, because the information from the serum test is just not accurate. It's more of a reflection of your last few meals than it is a reflection of your true nutritional status. Unless you have some severe deficiency, serum tests are just not always very helpful. How do you get tested for mold in the sinuses? You get a swab culture done, Jennifer. Most doctors, good doctors can do a sinus culture. They'll put a Q-tip up the nose and take a sinus culture. What's key with mold, if you're trying to find mold, is that you make sure that they hold the culture at least 4 weeks. A lot of them will hold the culture for a few days, and if it doesn't grow mold, then they'll call it a negative result. But it can sometimes take time for mold to grow, so they want to hold on to that culture for 4 weeks to ensure that you don't get an early false negative. Can't find a lab that does intracellular blood tests in the Netherlands. Any possibility to have it done at yours? Yeah, it is possible. We actually are I think we're in contact with someone in the Netherlands to help us get that there. But what I would do in the meantime is just reach out to our customer service. Reach out to Malaya. That's glutenology@gmail.com. and inquire with her. Is period blood clotting in the uterus a sign of perimenopause? No, no, it's not a definitive sign of that. My naturopath tested me for gluten sensitivity and it was negative, but I noticed gluten bothers my joints. Quinoa doesn't. Is it okay to eat quinoa? I would argue that your naturopath may not have tested you for gluten sensitivity in a comprehensive and accurate way. Were you genetic tested, Nancy? If you weren't genetic tested, but you were antibody tested, then the antibody tests create a lot of false negatives. Genetic testing helps you understand your genetic predisposition to react to gluten, which is a more important indicator for whether or not going gluten-free is going to be a healthy move for you to make. That's the best answer I can give you as far as whether or not you should eat quinoa. I would say that if you are gluten sensitive, again, I would doubt you were tested properly, but if you are gluten sensitive, I do not recommend quinoa because there are a couple of different quinoa proteins that have homology with gliadin, which is the name of the gluten found in wheat. And so for many people, it creates problems. Have you heard any updates about the FDA reviewing the fact that corn does contain gluten? No, they're not going to change that. We could spoon feed the studies, and it's not going to happen. And the reason why is they're not going to taint precious corn. You know, corn is one of the most profitable crops in the U.S. They're just not going to taint it. Look at what they did to fructose corn syrup. I mean, they advertised the positive aspects of high fructose corn syrup for years on TV, and those commercials were paid for by your tax dollars. They're not going to demonize corn. It's just not going to happen. I'm a realist in that way. Will you ever offer a functional nutrition program so people can become certified in gluten-free nutrition? Again, the problem with certification programs is that you assume that the person taking the program understood what you were teaching to the level that you were teaching, and then will go out in the world and represent what you taught to other people. It's a tough ask. You know, I know that I understand what I'm saying as I'm saying it, but what I don't know is whether the person who's hearing me understands it appropriately and can translate it appropriately. There's a lot that can be lost in translation. And so certification courses, to me, pose a risk, as we've already tried the physician certification course historically, and it just, yeah, it came back and bit me in the rear because, you know, again, even physicians that we were teaching weren't getting it. And it's a hard thing. It's a hard ask. I don't know. We probably not. Is there any book for biochemistry and nutrition that you can recommend us to read? Yeah, I mean, classic biochemistry textbooks. There's several of them. Any of those are fantastic. As far as nutrition, Brody, Nutritional Biochemistry by Brody is a good one. Nutrition, Modern Nutrition in Health and Disease by Shields, Marie Shields is a good one. You know, those are good places to start, but they're really thick. So you know, if you're going to read that kind of stuff, it's ideal if you have already like a biochem degree or a biology degree. Otherwise, you'll be navigating the terminology, and it'll be very confusing. But that's part of why I do my crash courses. Is I try to simplify complexity in those, and we have, I think to date over 40 crash courses on nutrition that you can tap into in our archives, in our video archives. I suffered for 3 years, followed your diet, was asked to go back on gluten for celiac test, ended up having to fast for 3 days, and because of the fast, I'm symptom-free. Can you speak up to the fasting and the symptom-free? Yeah, fasting accelerates stem cell production and a clearance of damaged cells. So a lot of people find that a 3 to 5 day fast can be extremely helpful. Intermittent fasting can also be helpful, Tanya. We have a crash course on fasting as well, you might find helpful. Thoughts on adding soybean during menopause? I'm not opposed to them if they're organic, and you don't react to them and you're not allergic to soy. Like, there's a lot of people that are allergic or react to soy. So for those individuals, it's not a good idea. But again, soy can be beneficial for the symptoms of menopause, again, as long as you're addressing it organically. But all these garbage soy products, I don't recommend. My daughter had 2 cysts on her ovaries and a large one in her uterus. She did castor oil packs nightly and was rechecked 2 months later, and they were all gone. Is this just chance with the castor oil? No, I've seen this so many times, Nancy. Now, there's no published studies on it. There's no double-blind, randomized, placebo-controlled trials. These are anecdotal stories when you hear people have these kinds of wonderful results with castor oil. But the stuff works. I've seen it work. I don't think we fully understand why or how it works, but it does work. And but at the end of the day, you know, it works in that regard. But what you want to make sure your daughter's also doing is modifying her diet and lifestyle so that they don't come back. Because there's a reason why cysts form on the ovaries and uterus. And my experience, one of those reasons is gluten. We see that very commonly. If fasting is that renewing, why don't more do induced medical fasting? Because the reality, I think this has got to be our last question. The reality of medical nutrition is this: it doesn't exist. There's really no such thing as medical nutrition. Some will say there is. You know, you've got the American Dietetic Association and the registered dietitians. And look, there's a lot of great registered dietitians out there, but as an organization, you know, they teach the same historical swill nonsense about cholesterol and saturated fat and other nonsense, other rhetoric that is not really all that scientifically backed. And so there's really no great viable way to get medical nutrition. So when you ask, why don't more prescribe medical fasting as a means to help people feel better quicker? This was the very question I had when I worked in the VA hospital. This was 23 years ago, I was there, and we were trying to get patients who had severe pain, who were struggling with rheumatological autoimmune arthritis, pain relief. And, you know, one of the elements to the research was that within 48 hours of fasting, many of these autoimmune arthritic patients would have tremendous benefit in their pain levels. And I could not convince a single doctor, not my attending or the resident above me, or the head physician on the floor. None of them were even interested in it at all. There was zero interest. And as a matter of fact, I was, in a sense, ridiculed for being there and even bringing nutrition up. So it's not something that's going to be accepted with open arms, because the fact of the matter is less than 7 hours of nutritional training is given in medical school. And usually the class goes like this: welcome to nutrition. It's not important. We'll see you next semester. Everyone gets an A. Like that, it's not a deep, in-depth teaching. And so there's no respect for it in the schools. So when doctors graduate, they have no premise of understanding it, and they have no respect for it. So they're not going to embrace it. They're going to embrace the tools that they have. And this is not a damnation of doctors either. They're just not trained in it. I think if more were trained in it, then more would embrace it. But you have to understand, when you're going to a medical doctor, you're not going to somebody who's been trained in it. So you also don't have the right to really ask them about it, because it's not their purview. It's not their expertise. It would be like asking the electrician to do your plumbing work. They didn't train in plumbing. They trained in electricity. So it's a different thing. But most people don't realize that. Most people have the kind of the attitude that they put in their minds anyway. In our culture, in our society, we put doctors on this pedestal thinking they know everything there is to need to know about how humans are healthy. But in reality, what our traditional model has evolved into is a symptom management paradigm where you get a diagnosis and then you get a drug to treat your symptoms, and oftentimes you get multiple drugs to treat your symptoms. But if you ask about causation, or you ask about nutrition or lifestyle or diet change or exercise, they're clueless. They're clueless. Not all of them. There are a lot of good ones too, but those good ones are good because they went on to get further educated. They didn't start getting educated while they were in the medical school. So it's a tough ask, but I don't expect them to understand it, and I don't really hold any animosity over them about them not understanding it, because again, it's just not part of their training. And so you just have to know who you're talking to and what is the expectation. And if you have the right expectation, the way I see it is most people could be their own doctor if they would quit outsourcing their health to people who really honestly truly don't care enough about them to spend more than 5 minutes with them about their health, right? I mean, the whole system is flawed in that you can't even get 5 minutes with a doctor. Now, how can anybody assess or evaluate you or give you real meaningful or solid advice if they're not even willing to spend more than 5 minutes with you? It's an impossibility. So it's an ask that they can't perform it. So if you understand that and recognize it, you'll quit wasting your time, effort, and endeavor into finding people who practice in that manner or in that way, and you'll find the ones that practice in a different way. And if everyone did that, we could bankrupt that system, and hopefully it would go away, or hopefully at the very least it would change and it would morph into something that was more resembling of a caring, empathetic system that put health over profits. Anyway, rant ended there as well. I'm going to go have lunch. Thanks so much for visiting with me today and tuning in. We'll be back on Tuesday, and we'll be back again next Thursday at 12:30 for your live questions and answers. Take care. We'll see you next week.